So on the subject of rewiring your brain, how is this change in mindset based in your study of neuroscience?
That's a really great question. So, your brain is a complex system that evolved over many millennia of the human evolution. And so what we know in science now are the parts of the brain that are the oldest parts of the brain. In other words, they've been with thinking beings for a very long time. Now, this is oversimplified, but I'm going to assume that our listeners, haven't been reading fMRIs and, checking out brain scans and things. So, to really simplify it, if we think about the different parts of the brain, what we're really talking about here are your reptilian brain, the oldest part of your brain. In case you're really curious, that's the part that's at the top of your spine, the back of your head, your limbic system, and your neocortex, which is behind your forehead. So if we think about that illustration as a chocolate-covered cherry, and we put that reptilian brain as the cherry, and we have the limbic system, and that's the little sweet juice that's in the cherry. And then the neocortex is the chocolate covering. Then we've got, if you think about rings of a tree, then we've sort of got the oldest part in the middle and the middle part in the middle and the newest part on the outside. So that's just an illustration for you. And I'm sorry if I made you all hungry and everyone's having a craving now for chocolate covered cherries. But that's just an illustration. And the reason that we care about that is because of the interrelationship between those parts of the brain and what we were made to do. So on a really basic level, when we're threatened, the oldest part of our brain reads that threat. So if you see a lion, well, then you probably don't live where I live. But if you see a lion, then your brain just says run, right? Especially if it's chasing you, run from the lion. That's a threat. It wants to eat you. And your brain should do that for you. You need that part. Where we get into trouble, and that's called the fight or flight response, right? We're either going to fly from the lion or we are going to fight the lion. Do not fight the lion. That's a bad choice. And your brain knows that. And so it puts into gear, all right, let's go. Now, the newer parts of the brain are where we're able to process. So if we see something that's threatening, we might say, oh, is that really a threat? I don't know. Maybe it is, maybe it isn't, right? These are the sort of medium threats. So let's say you're in a parking lot at the supermarket and, a cart is rolling towards you, right? It might hurt you, but this is not a major threat. You can say, okay, so I can stop the cart or I can move to the side, right? You can kind of process that versus the fight or flight. What happens in a lot of writers' brains, however, is that because of this emotional response that we were just talking about previously, where things are really deep-seated in people's minds and people's psyches, is that they've already created a response where when someone says what Mr. Smith told you in the 3rd grade, boom, you're into fight or flight, you don't function, right? Whenever you've had that response in your life, it probably wasn't a lion, but, maybe you saw a dangerous situation or you were in a fire or a forest fire or something was chasing you, or even when you were a kid playing tag, you got this sort of high heart rate response. You're not thinking. Adrenaline kicks in and, you're either fighting or you're fleeing. Those are the choices. So what happens in a non-imminently dangerous situation when we get into fight or flight is the same physiological response. Except now there's no lion, there's no knife. It's me and a bunch of writers in my writing group, and I can't function. So if I'm in that response, I am not being a creative person. I am not being a productive person. I probably can't even communicate really well to respond to people because I'm in fight or flight. I might fight, right? I might say, you big jerks, I can't believe you, right? I might sort of fight against that. That might be my impulse. I might, slam down my books and storm out of the room. That's flight. But nothing productive can physiologically happen for me right now because I've been what's called emotionally hijacked. And so many writers put themselves in this scenario where they're perpetually emotionally hijacked. Well, guess what? They're not going to be creative because they simply can't. It is physically impossible for them to be creative in that state. And that's the brain science of what happens to us when we live in fear, when we're perpetually in fear, and we haven't got a strategy to get out of